Would you like to be somebody who understands why asking questions is so important? Then listen to this entire video where I first explain the fundamental problem we have and how if you don't ask questions, you don't really solve the problem, or actually it inhibits you from even solving any problems in life if you don't ask questions. So before we get into this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to learn more about self-development, dating, Jungian psychology, and how to reduce suffering in life altogether. Let's get into it. Now, a major portion of life entails suffering and pain because we are limited human beings. We have limited brain capacity, limited physical capacity, but we are subjected to an infinite environment, an infinite universe. So the universe, for example, can send us an infinite number of viruses like the coronavirus. It has no problem with doing that, but we do not have an infinite number of resources to protect ourselves and keep us alive. Hence, we suffer. Now, when I use the word suffering, I'm referring to all types of negative emotions also, like dissatisfaction, sadness, or, for example, would be stress at work. The likelihood of us being stressed regularly is quite high because in business you need to perform, you need to deliver value, and in order to do that you need to perform, you need to compete, and that is stressful because you're put under pressure, and the human, in order to react to that, needs to be put under pressure in order to, react to it and perform as a result of it. So this gives rise to a problem that we face. The fundamental problem is we suffer. Humans suffer. And I've contemplated the nature of suffering for many, many months now. And suffering, I think, can be segregated into two different types. There is tragedy, which is inherent in life, and there is unnecessary suffering. So tragedy and unnecessary suffering. Tragedy is inherent in life in that we cannot really, let's say, reduce it because of our limited nature. Like, we are going to get cancer, we are going to get run over by a car, it happens because that's just, the running over by a car, that could probably be reduced, but things like accidents happening, it just happens because of our limited nature. Whereas unnecessary suffering can be reduced because it is the result of suboptimal behavior, which wouldn't have to necessarily take place. For example, if you adopt very destructive habits like excessive substance abuse or excessive general substance consumption, you make your body deteriorate and you mess with your, let's say, your mood, and that will rub off on the people around you, and then they will have to pay for your caprice and your volatile emotions, which can lead in unnecessary suffering. Now, the problem the problem of suffering is sort of the most fundamental problem because it can lead us to despise our own existence and adopt nihilistic tendencies where we think that there is no meaning in anything, certainly not in life, and that there is no point in life or any value within humans. And if you continue on this train of thought, you can end in suicidal, homicidal thoughts, like, for example, the Columbine killers concluded. However, if you don't end up that far, you can still end up just adopting self-destructive behaviors just because you don't really respect yourself and you don't value yourself. Anyway, that is the problem. It's an existential problem in some sense, which is the most pressing problem because it threatens our survival. And this issue with suffering, the problem, will continue to exist with certainty unless something is done about it. Here I'm referring to the unnecessary suffering. So if you don't ask questions, let's draw it back now. If you don't ask questions, you won't find answers. When you ask a question, you actually formulate the problem. And if you don't formulate the problem, the likelihood of you solving the problem is very low because each problem is characterized by idiosyncratic qualities. The qualities are individual and specific to the problem. So the likelihood of you solving these specific traits is insignificantly low because there are so many traits or variables in life. That's what makes life so complex. And the likelihood of you randomly deploying some sort of solution that's supposed to solve a problem is the likelihood of that randomly deployed what would you call it? randomly deployed package solving the problem, the likelihood of that happening is so low. And we tend to be aware that a problem is present. We know that problems are present, yet we often try not to think about it because facing the problem is painful. That's understandable. But because, the problems are dark, they may entail realizing that you are complicit in the problem. That's difficult. But the issue is that the problem remains in unclarity, in unpredictability. You don't understand the problem then if you don't think about it and don't question it. And if you don't think or speak about it, you do not use logos to articulate it clearly. And logos entails speaking truthfully, articulating the truth and logic. When you don't apply logos, then the problem remains chaotic and you are not able to grasp it properly. The problem continues to burden your existence, especially if you're conscientious, if you're a conscientious person, like it's on your shoulders, but you don't formulate it, so you cannot solve it, and that is an issue. Now let us draw this back to asking why asking questions is so key. Asking questions is the method by which you formulate the problem. You use questions to tap around and try to identify the traits that characterize the problem. For example, let's say the problem is you're failing your classes, or that seems to be a problem that you're faced with. So you're failing your classes. Okay, let's run through this. Why are you failing? Your grades aren't above the passing grade. Okay, why aren't you above a 50%, let's say? Maybe you say, well, I struggle with the essay questions in the exam, but seem to get good grades on the multiple choice questions. Okay, so why are you failing the essay questions? The professor says, I don't use evidence to substantiate my arguments in the essay. Okay, why don't you use evidence? I don't prepare any evidence before the exam. Why don't you prepare evidence before the exam? Because I don't read up on the news, the news that has been occurring in politics recently. There you go. The problem is that you don't look into geopolitical situations occurring recently in order to find evidence that can substantiate your arguments in your essay, which would increase the quality of your essay and get you a higher grade. Voila. But if you hadn't had asked those questions, you wouldn't know how to solve the problem that you're failing your exams. You may know that you're failing your exams, and that's kind of an issue, but actually getting to the cause of the problem and allowing you to actually solve it would not have happened if you hadn't deduced by asking questions of why is this occurring? Why are you failing the exam? Why aren't you getting a good grade on your essay? Why aren't you using evidence? This might sound sort of quite pathetic. Like, of course obviously you would know how to figure out that you're failing your exam because your essays aren't good quality. But trust me, it's not that self-evident to people. People do not work as rationally as we would expect sometimes, and I know that for myself. Like, facing problems seems like an enormous mountain sometimes that casts shade on people, and it seems too big to challenge. Too big of a challenge to face very often. So people just turn around and look away from the mountain. But the problem is that the mountain is still casting a shadow onto you. You're still subject to the problem. Just because you're not looking at it doesn't mean it's not there. And in some sense, this is also a form of lying, because you are actually omitting the truth from your consciousness. You are sort of voluntarily choosing not to face the truth of what is going on. Now, asking questions shows that you are inquisitive and want to understand the world. It also shows courage, because we all unconsciously know the world entails a fair share of darkness and horror. It entails pain when you get a first glimpse of the problem of suffering, but it is also the cornerstone to developing a society that can reduce the unnecessary suffering of its citizens. And I think that is probably one of the best objectives one can have in life, to reduce unnecessary suffering. You would really be manifesting your potential and giving back to the community that offered you your own opportunities that you took advantage of, and you gained from. So in conclusion, asking questions is so important because it allows you to formulate the problem, which actually gives you an opportunity to solve it. Because if you don't formulate it, the problem remains vague and unclear. You know it's there, but you don't know exactly what it entails, what characterizes the problem. And in order to solve a problem, you need to know what traits it entails in order to perfectly solve it, because there are so many traits, such complex problems. You need the likelihood of you just randomly deploying a solution that's supposed to help and actually it's solving the problem is so low, because life is just too complex, and you really need to hone in on the problem, ask questions which will allow you to identify the traits that characterize the problem. And that's really the key to solving, to reducing unnecessary suffering, which is the most pressing problem I think that humans are subjected to nowadays. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a comment below if you agree with my opinion that asking questions is vital to solving problems in life, and what kind of problems you have solved by actively engaging in the traits of the problem and asking what is the problem and deducing it. So please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to learn more about self-development, dating, Jungian psychology, and how to reduce suffering in life. Thank you for listening.